order. Welcome to our scheduled meeting of Health, Mental Health, and Education Committee. It's a little 9:10 and we're in City Hall, room 1010. It appears we have a quorum, so I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to remind those who would like to speak today to fill out the general comment cards in the back, and please submit them to the officer in front of the room. At this point, I'd like to start with public comment. Seeing that there is no public comment, I'd like to go to items 1 and 2. I would like to move items 1 and 2 together. Mr. CLA, would you please read in items 1 and 2, please?
Item number 1 is a City Administrative Officer report relative to a request from the Los Angeles Department of Aging for authority to accept health insurance counseling and advocacy program HICAP grant funds from the California Department of Aging and to execute a proposed contract with the Center for Health Care Rights for the provision of HICAP services. Item number 2 is Los Angeles Department of Aging report relative to a request for authorization to accept a 3-year grant award for a total of $30,000 from the Los Angeles Foundation on Aging to support the Financial Emergency Assistance Program for seniors and their family caregivers in crisis.
You know, both these items are to accept grant funding for the Department of Aging so that they can better serve their constituents. If my colleagues are okay with it, I'd like to move both these items on consent.
So moved.
Great. Seeing there's no public comment cards and no objections, the committee approves of this item on consent. Item number 3, Mr. CLA, would you please read item 3 on the agenda?
Item number 3 is motion Blumenfield-Buscaino relative to instructing all city departments that interact with the elder population, including but not limited to the Department of Aging, Department of Recreation and Parks, and Housing, Community, and Investment Department to report on any existing policy to report elder abuse, and if no such policy exists, the relevant departments to report on a proposed policy for reporting suspected elder abuse.
Great. And today we wanted a brief discussion about the prevalence of elder abuse in the city. In particular, we want to hear about policies in place to report elder abuse when observed by city staff. The issue was brought to our attention by Councilmember Blumenfield, and we have some constituents. Do we have his constituents in his district? And a constituent in his district. However, this issue affects all our seniors, and we're glad to discuss it today. Now I understand there's a representative from Council District 3 who would like to provide context for this motion. Mr. John Popash, would you please have a seat in the front and let us know the impetus for this motion?
Sure. Thank you very much, Chair and Council members. Appreciate it. Apologies that Councilmember Blumenfield couldn't make it. I'll be brief because it's more important you hear from our special guest on the subject. How the motion came to be was that I happen to be a board member of a Democratic club, and one of my fellow board members mentioned to me that her cousin had been the subject or the victim of elder abuse, and she approached me about finding out what we could do at the state level, maybe to figure out if there's a way to have mandated reporters that might be gas meter readers, and other agencies and city employees. I mentioned we don't have to wait for the state. Why don't we have the city try something out? Maybe the state will follow suit. And spoke with Councilmember Blumenfield about it, and he liked the idea of us having an opportunity to look at what departments are doing as far as policy, and possibly making all city employees mandated reporters to recognize elder abuse, and then to be able to know what to do next to report it. For Councilmember Blumenfield, it's something near and dear to his heart. He worked to protect adult day health care in the state with Councilmember Fuentes, then Assemblymember Fuentes, and senior issues have been very important to him. He's also worked on fraud prevention workshops, and it's a vulnerable group in our population, and we just want to make sure that we have protections for our seniors. And I'm not quite sure why we don't have more issues surrounding seniors in the city. So I really appreciate you taking up this item in your committee, Chair. I don't think there's any reason, whether we can make mandated reporters or not to at least encourage departments to train staff on what to look for and the process for which to report. So if we can prevent one person from abuse, that would be great, but maybe we'll be able to save a lot of people from abuse. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for the context. And at this point, I'd like to open the floor for public comment. I believe we have Mr. Amos Fried. How are you, sir?
Pronounced Amos.
Amos. Apologize.
Thank you so much for having me this morning, Mr. Chairman and the rest of the council members. I know Mitch O'Farrell very well, and thank you for your help in some other matters. Anyhow, my name is Amos Fried, and I'm a senior advocate. I'm a senior advocate. 3 years I've been serving as the Los Angeles City Department of Aging, Council on Aging, as president. My term is going to be ended this month. I'm also past president of One Generation Advisory Council. Regarding the elder abuse, I'd like to say that I applaud Mr. Blumenfield for his motion and encourage its passage. As we all know, seniors in our community are very vulnerable. And abuse takes many forms. It can be physical, emotional, financial, and neglect. Often, the perpetrators are family members, friends, and neighbors. The seniors, as we know, are very trusting individuals. Often, as a result, are very victims of financial abuse. And I'm sure you're all familiar with some of the scams that has been going on, especially the telephone call saying your grandchild is in jail, send money. Or some of the physical abuse, beating, emotional battering, and neglect by paid caregivers who are serving them. However, if some of you know, those seniors embarrassed to becoming victims, they have a tendency not to report on this terrible situation. So it's important that agencies, as the motion calls for, develop the policies and invite more members of...
Go ahead and finish. Go ahead.
No, just more members of the public to join, even though they are not mandated reporters. And I applaud against you, Mr. Blumenfield, as well as this committee, and I urge you to pass it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much. Could I get the representatives from the Department of Aging, Department of Recreation and Parks, Department of Housing, and Community Investment? If you guys could have a seat in the front of the room. Is our city attorney here as well? Oh, okay.
I'm here. Good morning.
And you could answer, if we have questions for you, you could answer from there,
Yeah.
right? Great. Could the Department of Aging give us a brief overview on how to report elder abuse? And could you please state your name for the record?
Thank you. James Don, Assistant General Manager for the Department of Aging. The law requires that anyone who observes or suspects a case of elder abuse who's a mandated reporter, that they must notify either law enforcement or Adult Protective Services. There's also a very specific form that needs to be supplied. Now, the Department of Aging, as an area agency on aging, is a mandated reporter. Therefore, all employees within our department are mandated to report any cases or suspected cases of abuse. We have a unit in our department, our information assistance unit, which usually takes the lead in fielding calls about suspected abuse. They also serve as the technical advisors for any city, any department employee who runs across an incident to make sure that we report it appropriately. Usually we report cases to the county's Adult Protective Services. Of course, if anyone witnesses actual physical abuse, they call LAPD. The department itself is not an expert on elder abuse. That's why we contract services. We have an ongoing contract with Wise and Healthy Aging for ombudsman services. So if there are any cases of elder abuse or suspected abuse in nursing homes, that's the agency that takes the lead in the investigation. If we receive complaint calls about elder abuse in where a senior lives at their own home, those cases are referred to Adult Protective Services. In addition to our contract for ombudsman services, we also have contracts with Bethesdic Legal Services. We've often referred cases of suspected scams perpetrated on seniors. For instance, I recall there was a series of scams where workers would come up to a senior's home and offer to fix their driveway. In fact, they never actually fixed the driveway. They didn't even use concrete in fixing the driveway, but they tricked the senior into signing a lien on their property. So usually in those cases, we refer them to Bethesdic for legal assistance in fighting that. In terms of the department and our other efforts, we coordinate with other city departments such as Water and Power, General Services, Building and Safety, and Housing for referrals. For instance, the field staff for Water and Power, if they run across a senior that seems to be suffering from elder abuse, including self-neglect, oftentimes they're not sure if it's abuse. So what we've arranged is an SOS system where they notify our staff about a suspected case, and we would investigate further and involve Adult Protective Services as necessary. Now, we also contract with nonprofit agencies throughout the city. We have 15 multi-purpose senior centers. Each one of them are also mandated reporters because they provide senior services to the community, and each of them also have their own social workers to assist their staff in reporting. And they basically follow the same rule that we do. As mandated reporters, anyone on their staff, from the social worker to the nutrition site manager, if they observe or suspect a case of elder abuse, they have to report it. And lastly, I'll leave with you these brochures that we have on elder abuse. It's also on our website. This one is in English, but on our website we also have versions in Spanish and Korean.
You could pass it. No, that'll be great. Department of Recreation and Parks, can you state your name and do you have anything to add?
Yes, Carl Cooper, Superintendent, Department of Recreation and Parks, and I also have.
Gonzalo Manrique, Principal Recreation Supervisor.
And currently, the Department of Recreation and Parks does not have a policy on reporting elder abuse, but we've always had guidelines for department staff on reporting anything that may have come to them or something that they see out in the field. Seniors for Department of Recreation and Parks pretty much, they come to our programs for more recreational and social interaction. We really don't have any caseworkers or what we call custodial care type programs. So we don't get a lot of it, but we do train our staff on this. It comes to mind that in past January, we actually sent staff to training with the city attorney's office where they talked about elder abuse and elder scams. And we do quarterly trainings with our senior staff. Actually last month in August, they actually had a nonprofit group that came out that stopped senior scam groups that basically, as our counterparts here from Department of Aging said, to help our staff kind of help seniors if they come in with certain issues or concerns. So we don't have a policy. We've always had ongoing guidelines. We've also always had ongoing trainings to notify our staff. We do, in the case of if something comes to us, we'll refer the seniors to LAPD, or we will call LAPD if we feel it deems. But there's also a senior abuse hotline that we do call in the case of issues related to seniors. So right now, that's how Department of Recreation Parks handles it.
Okay, before we do questions, HSID, can you please state your name and talk about
Good
your
morning,
department?
Roya Babazadeh and Olivia Mitchell from Housing and Community Investment Department. We are here to provide you with information about available protocols in our department assisting elder citizens from awareness of services and to reporting elderly abuse. To start with awareness, knowing that the number of elderly is increasing in our communities, we proactively partnered with Department of Aging to develop a protocol in providing the elderly citizens with the needed services and bringing to their attention what is available to them in the city. Through this partnership, we developed a form, SOS, as it was mentioned, and we are referring elderly that we think they need additional services, whether it is financial assistance or legal or emotional support. We refer them to Department of Aging through the SOS process. We also provided extensive training in partnership with Aging to our staff. These are mandatory training for all of our staff to attend. We started with staff that they directly work with the public. And these trainings provide them with the information, what is available in the city to this community, and also train them to identify the signs of any potential abuse and then a venue that they can report that. We extended these trainings to all of our staff because whether they are in communication directly with the community or in their own life, in their neighborhood, in their family, they are dealing with elderly, they need to know this information. And we also extended the training to our contractors that are in field, meeting with landlords and tenants and in their living place, and they may notice any sign that they need to report that. Besides the training that we have provided, we also customize our services. When in the course of business we come across an elderly tenant or landlord that they need special assistance, we customize our services to make sure they get all the assistance that they need. As an example for that, a few months ago, one of our RIP outreach contractors referred a tenant to us. This tenant was elderly, living in a very unsafe condition in the RIP unit, and the property owner wanted to do extensive construction in the property and wanted to pay relocation to the tenant to live. Tenant was 74 years old, living in that unit for over 40 years. So was rejecting the relocation assistance because that unit and the neighborhood that she had was her supporting group. Leaving that unit would be extensive interruption in her lifestyle. So we met with the landlord, and we make sure that landlord knows their responsibilities and is going to provide the right to return to the unit to the tenant with the same rate of the rent, and rent is not going to be increased because she couldn't afford it. Also, we worked with the landlords to find another safe unit that is within 1 mile radius. That is, still this tenant could have the support group coming and meeting her. And landlord had another property in that radius and provided a safe unit. And we referred that tenant to the Department of Aging, and that they provided extensive services for the pet, for the meal, and any other services that the tenants needed. And we were able to mitigate the situation. This tenant could be very hardly impacted by this move, but we made sure that the impact was the minimum. In the course of business, any way we can customize to assist our elderly, we'll do that. Olivia can provide you with more information about reporting elderly abuse.
Olivia Mitchell, and then I manage a team that oversees our family source centers and our domestic violence programs. We have minimal exposure to seniors. Mostly they come to us as the guardians of the children that they bring to us, and we have not had any of our contractors speak to us about the seniors having been abused. We do not go to homes, so we have none of those issues. We do contract also with community agencies. They are all mandatory reporters, as are we, because our programs deal with children as well as elderly. We haven't really thought about it as extensively in terms of elderly as we have in the training that the Department of Disability did for us as mandatory reporters on child abuse and children's issues as children do come to our facilities and we're able to see them. In our domestic violence shelter program, there is no age requirement, but I did ask how many people we are servicing that are over 60, and really very few, except for the fact that this year we had 9, last year we had 5, and the year before we had 2. So I think that it's something that we need to look at and see if there's some kind of trend. I mean, 9 people when you serve 500 people over a year through 10 contractors, but it's still something that we should look at. We are part of the housing department. We don't go, as Roya said, into homes and et cetera, but she has been working with us to make certain that we are well trained in terms of elder abuse should it come to our attention.
Thank you for the overview. It's unfortunate that this topic needs to be discussed, and as we all know, it's unfortunate that there are people who take advantage of our seniors. And as we know, our elder population is growing. And the ways to target the elders are growing in the last decade, especially with new technologies. You know, I have a couple of questions before I open it up to my colleagues. So, as all city employees are required, it appears that they are required to report, right?
Within our department as a mandated reporter, not necessarily every city department.
Yes, we're Recreation Parks, we're child abuse mandated reporters, which is more for children, not for adults.
Not for adults.
Mm-hmm.
What about HSID?
Same. We're mandated reporters for children for certain, but I would assume that would include elders should we run into them.
Is that a state regulation, or is that just a city?
State law.
State law.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And and it seems like HSID, you guys have training available for your staff and contractors?
Correct.
It's not required.
This training is provided by Department of Aging. It's a series of 8-session training that we started that with the first group of our staff as a mandatory training for our staff. We are extending that training to all staff now.
Oh, so it's required now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. What about for Recs and Parks?
No, we don't have mandated trainings, but we do quarterly trainings with our recreation staff, and part of that is mandate reporting and knowing the policies and guidelines for reporting elder abuse.
And basically for aging department, there's 2 mechanisms. You report to APS, which is the county, Adult Protective Services, or you have 3, I'm sorry, the Long-Term Care Ombudsman.
Correct.
And BetSedic.
Yes.
Do you guys work with LA County Consumer Affairs as well?
Yeah, when necessary. I mean, in past projects we have, for instance, a while back, before the housing bubble crash, we were working with them and actually with banks on creating a coalition to handle reverse mortgages to make sure seniors can tap into the equity of their homes for services without getting scammed. That was one of our major concerns.
Okay. Yeah, because in a previous life, I was also a commissioner at the Consumer Affairs, and they have, the county they have more budget and more equipped to do a lot of these things. So I want to make sure that we don't limit ourselves to just Adult Protective Services, and also the Department of Mental Health as well. Do you guys?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, one of the earlier items that the committee just passed, the Emergency Assistance Fund, we actually partner with Genesis over at Mental Health. That's one of the groups that refer seniors in need to us.
Right. Yeah, because elder abuse, and neglect comes in all forms, and especially if they don't have family.
Right.
And as they get older, you have the dementia, mental health issues. So it's sometimes even helping them protect themselves from themselves.
Right.
So, I want to open it up to questions to my colleagues if you have any.
I have a few quick ones. Thanks, Mr. Chair. In terms of when a form of abuse is verified, Is it up to the victim to file charges? Otherwise, there are no charges that are filed?
That's beyond my expertise, because usually once we refer them to Adult Protective Services, or if it's, there's cross-reporting between Adult Protective Services and LAPD. So what we do is we follow up with APS to ensure that they did send a social worker out to investigate the charge and whether or not it was resolved. But
So once it goes to Adult Protective Services, they sort of do case management from there. And
correct.
whatever the consequences may be, whether it becomes a criminal charge or even a prosecution, then they would have all that information and you wouldn't necessarily even have that.
No, but there are cases where if there's no perpetrator, let's say a case of self-neglect, APS will circle back and notify us and coordinate with us and our local multipurpose center to provide services, support services, like in-home, home delivered meals, housekeeping. We have limited resources for that.
And as far as the scams, whether it's by phone or over the internet, what's the jurisdiction for that? Is it PUC or who do you interact with in the same?
Actually, we do have a relationship with City Attorney's Office. The City Attorney's Office has a FAST team, where it's a combination of City Attorneys, LAPD, and Ombudsman. They coordinate services, as well as in the past we've assisted in their grant application with Department of Justice for additional services. As a matter of fact, in the beginning of November, the Mayor's Office and City Attorney is holding a special elder abuse training, and I believe our contracted social workers will be attending that training.
So scam type crime, is that referred to that unit at City Attorney's Office then, or?
Yeah, among others. Again, I'm not an expert on elder abuse, that technicality about the law. I'm sorry, I can't answer that. I can find out for you.
I'm just wondering how that's handled. If there, I guess where I'm going is, are there systems in place for every type of claim that is made in relation to elder abuse? That's kind of where I'm going.
Oh.
And as far as incidents of Alzheimer's or dementia, that doesn't seem as though it's being adequately addressed. How's that handled?
At that point, there's conservatorship. As a matter of fact, Bethesdic Legal Services assists with that. At one time, when there was a lot more funding available, we partnered with Bethesdic for a grant that allowed them to actually set up conservatorship training classes at the courthouses, so that as family caregivers came in, they could learn how to execute a conservatorship to protect their their parents.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilman Fuentes? On the line of questioning, I just had a couple of more questions. So when it warrants, or when does it warrant a referral to City Attorney's Office or the District Attorney? And how many referrals have you given to the City Attorney or the District Attorney?
Usually,
you or the City Attorney could answer.
In terms of city referral to the FAST team or City Attorney, usually if it's a scam versus a physical abuse. I don't have a breakdown of the scam part, but I do know that on average, at least for the last 6 months, we average about 4 referrals per month to Adult Protective Services.
What about to the City Attorney?
I don't have that information.
I know the City Attorney has a internet something division, I believe.
Well, I apologize because you're talking about referrals to the criminal division, and I'm on the civil side, so I don't know.
Oh.
Yeah, those would be on the criminal side, but in general, the City Attorney's Office handles misdemeanors. So scams that were felonies would all be referred to the District Attorney's Office. So whatever crime was committed would, for the City Attorney's Office to handle it, have to be of such a nature that it was a misdemeanor, not a felony.
A financial crime of us.
Well, it depends on the dollar amount involved. And so I guess the question is how much money is involved. Misdemeanor if it's under a certain amount, felony if it's over a certain amount. But that raises an issue in terms of what LAPD does, because for people who only have $1,000, theft of $50 is comparable to theft of over $10,000. So, but that becomes sort of what is LAPD's threshold? What kinds of financial abuse does it address? And then depending upon what they do, it either goes to the city attorney's office or to the district attorney's office. And if I can just point out one quick thing, in terms of the mandatory reporting, if you are covered as a mandatory reporter, your failure to report is of itself a misdemeanor.
Thank you. What's your staff and budget for your department, Mr. Don?
Our budget for the staff side is about $4 million per year. We have about $14 million in Older American Act funds for senior services. We have between 24 and $27 million in total of grant funds and city dollars for services.
How many staff do you guys have?
We're budgeted for 48, but we're running currently at about a 25% vacancy rate.
And how many dedicated to, or is everybody in your, or how many dedicated to, I guess, abuse or this related?
We're all mandated reporters. We don't have anyone dedicated specifically to deal with elder abuse. As I mentioned earlier, our INA section is our lead in terms of assisting with complaints. We also have a clinical social worker on staff to assist our contractors with technical questions regarding social work, which includes elder abuse. But mainly we contract out for elder abuse services with ombudsman and legal services. And I just don't have those exact contract amounts off the top of my head.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman?
Yes.
I would be negligent on my domestic violence side to not mention that the celebration this year of domestic violence is focusing on domestic violence later in years, and that through a grant that the mayor's office has received, the Domestic Violence Task Force created a subcommittee to look at domestic abuse in later years. And the training that he is speaking about, there'll be another training in November to look at that whole issue of domestic violence in later years.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. We have anything else you guys want to add? Thank you. We have one more public comment. Who came in a little later. Michelle Morton, would you like to come on up and?
Hi. First off, I really want to thank you for holding this hearing and finding out from the city what they're already doing. My name is Michelle Morton. I also want to thank John Popich and Councilman Blumenfield's office as well. My name is Michelle Morton. I'm a former firefighter in EMT here in LA County. So my jurisdiction was outside of the city. I'm not sure of your name, but as a mandated reporter, again, the procedure was very simple. We were to notify if we suspected or saw, had firsthand knowledge of abuse or neglect, to either notify law enforcement or notify the appropriate protective services agency, child protective for a child and adult for elderly abuse, and then follow that up with a written report, one-page form that would be submitted again to the appropriate protective services agency. And that's key because it's a clear policy that everyone knows, and it guides you when you're out in the field. I've had to report on one particular instance where I did have to report where I came up on scene, and the home health nurse in this case was literally running out the front door as we were driving up to the scene. And it turned out that the elderly woman had been was in dire straits, had been emaciated, was very ill. She thankfully had a neighbor who had been out of town, who had returned to town, who had looked in on her. And so the system did work. The neighbor did call 911. We did respond. And I made the report again because I witnessed this woman leaving. And as far as follow-up, I'm sure it was followed up. I would encourage, there may be other individuals, not just the Department of Aging, but anyone who's in the home. If there is a city inspector, a lot of elderly do, they may be doing renovations to their home. And so some of those things.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll need to, was that for me, that 1 minute? I'm sorry. Okay. They'll, if that city inspector, it witnesses something, they certainly should be encouraged to report, and I would encourage a standard policy. Also for utility workers, if they're, in particular, they turn on and turn off utilities, they may very well come across a situation, and they should also be encouraged to report. But I am very encouraged to find out that at least we do have, the mandated for many of the, for a couple of the different departments.
Thank you. Thank you. Seeing there's no further question or comments, I'd like to move and approve item number 3. As important, for it is important that we have city policy for this issue. Actually, Mrs. Clerk, if I wanted to add something, do I approve and accept this and do another motion, or do I?
You just state the amendments that you're making.
Yeah, this is a great report, and this is such a very important issue that we must face with. And as mental health education, one of the main focuses for this committee is want to make sure that we collaborate with other entities, other government entities or nonprofits, especially the county, because the county does have more resources to deal with a lot of these issues. And mental health is going to be a huge focus, but I'm glad Councilmember Blumenfield brought this to our attention, because this is, unfortunately, an epidemic. And as our senior population is getting older, it's very important that we have policies and procedures in place to get prepared for it. Therefore, I'd like to keep this in committee and direct the Department of Aging, with assistance from the CLA and the City Attorney's Office, to lead on pulling together information from not just the 2 other departments, but any other departments you guys could think of, as well as different jurisdictions like the county, Department of Mental Health, Consumer Affairs, and or any other departments that interact with seniors. And I think even DWP, if we could try to see how they could get involved, especially with reporting suspected elder abuse. I'd like to request the Department of Aging to report back to this committee in 60 days. Is that okay? That's fine, 60 days?
If we run into any problems, we'll request an extension from your office.
Great. So I was going to say 45, but I'm going to expand the scope a little, so I'll say 60 days on recommendations for policies on reporting, not just reporting suspected senior abuse, but if you could kind of give us a report on pulling everything together and seeing how everything, the system works together, as Councilman O'Farrell was asking about, whether it's a one-sheet or even ways to update the brochure that we have, because it seems like there's a lot more breadth of resources out there. And also in looking into training or reporting. I know your department is mandatory, other departments are optional or mandatory, seeing the options to make it mandatory, if it's feasible or if it's a good idea for the other departments that are here today, as well as even DWP. Maybe having the optional training for them, or just what we can do within our, that makes sense for us, as well as leveraging all the different resources out there. So do I have a second?
Yeah, I think is this a motion?
Yes, it was
If it's a motion, I'll second it.
So you can report back in 60 days. So moved. With no other business before us, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you to the department, and thank you to the concerned citizens who joined us.